Shalom. Welcome. I'm Rabbi Scott with Beth Yeshua Messianic Synagogue in Fort Myers, Florida. Welcome to our online channel, YouTube channel, where we publish our teachings through the week. You'll see that we have our Revelation series, which is taught by Rabbi Jim, is posted here, as well as these midweek Torah study videos, as well as our Shabbat services and other assorted services. We post these here for all of you to enjoy. If you've stumbled across our site for the first time, welcome. The way this works is you're welcome to join us and reach out to us via email or via the comments. And we love a good discussion and good dialogue. So please let us know if you have any contribution or any questions or any comments. If you live in Fort Myers in Southwest Florida or anywhere around here, you're welcome to join us for Shabbat services. Our services are in-person services. We don't require masks at this time because that's the landscape of where we live these days. But we've got plenty of room and would love for you to join us if you'd like to do that. The last thing that I will mention is just a thank you to our people who support us. We are supported by your gifts and tithes and love offerings. And we have many of our people who support us, and so just a thank you for that, because times are these are interesting times, truly, and those who give in faith in these days are truly walking in faith and in righteousness. So just a thank you that you have included us in your giving and in your contribution to the kingdom. If you would like to give, there's instructions in the description below. You will find a link to give, and then also instructions to our website, my email address, etc., etc., etc. Without further delay, let's get started this week. It is Parshat 19, Terumah, contribution coming from Shemot, Exodus chapter 25, going through chapter 27, verse 19. We will summarize the Parshat and then go from there. Adonai commands Moses to build a Mishkan, and you will hear the phrase Mishkan, the word Mishkan, frequently. The word Mishkan means sanctuary or refuge or place, and it means the tabernacle or the tent of meeting. Adonai commands Moses to build this and supplies him with very detailed instructions. The people of Israel, the children of Jacob, are asked to contribute precious metals, stones, fabrics, skins, oil, and spices. You will remember that when they fled Egypt, they plundered the Egyptians in recompense for all their slave labor. Adonai had them plunder the Egyptians. The Egyptians gave it up quickly and freely, and so they left Egypt with a great deal of precious stones, with gold and silver and so forth. In the Mishkans, the tabernacle, the tent's outer courtyard is an altar for the burnt offerings and a laver for washing. The tent of meeting is divided by a curtain into two chambers. The outer chamber is accessible only to the priests, the descendants of Aaron. This contains the table of showbreads, the menorah, and the golden altar for incense. The innermost chamber, which is called the most holy place, or the especially holy place, or oftentimes the Holy of Holies, may be entered only by the Kohen Gadol, that is the high priest, and only once a year on Yom Kippur. Here inside the most holy place is the ark that held the Ten Commandments, inscribed on the two tablets of stone, which Adonai gave to the people of Israel on Mount Sinai. All of the utensils and vessels, as well as the construction of the Mishkan, are described in detail. So that's the summary. Of course, our summary is we borrow the summary from Or Sameach, and it's just kind of a quick little paragraph summary that we read to kind of get on the same page with the Torah portion. If you go to Or Sameach, you'll find they've got a lot of very good material for studying the Torah. Okay, Exodus 25. Take up a collection. They are to make a sanctuary, the text says, chapter 25, verse 8. They are to make a sanctuary so that I may live among them. This is a profound thing, that Adonai Tzvaot, Adonai Lord of Hosts, Adonai in the heavens, would demand a sanctuary be made so that he may live among us. The idea of this is mind-boggling, that he would do this. It says, you are to make it according to everything I show you, the designs of the tabernacle, designs of its furnishings, this is how you are to make it. And I don't want to skip beyond this without taking a moment to really understand the profundity of this task. They're going to make a space suitable for the abiding presence of the Creator God of the universe. They're going to create this space, and according to certain design, according to certain instructions. But in making this space, it is going to be suitable and sufficient for Adonai to dwell, to make his name to dwell. The first thing we see in this is the instructions of building the Mishkan, building the tabernacle. It begins with the Ark. And I want to pause on that. That's where the descriptions begin, is with the Ark. Most people would begin with a structure. This would be like going to the architect and saying, I would like you to design a house for us. And the architect takes out a blank piece of paper and he says, okay, let's begin. Tell me what you want. Tell me what you want your house to look like. And you tell the architect, well, this is what that couch is going to look like. I want the couch to look like this. It's a very specific couch. It's going to look like this. It's going to be this long. It's going to be this wide. It's going to be this high. And this is what it's going to be covered with. And the architect is like, okay, I got the couch. But most people normally would begin with the house, would begin with the structure, would begin with the shape, or begin with the parameters. I need 2 bedrooms, I need 3 bedrooms, I need 5 bedrooms, something to that effect. Most people would begin with some sort of structural component, and here we begin with the interior furnishings, if you will. Why does Adonai begin with the ark? Because this is going to be the throne of the presence of Adonai on earth. It is called later the seat where he will dwell, or the seat of mercy where he will dwell, the seat of atonement where he will dwell. This is the ark. It is covered over with gold inside and out. Remember Moses' basket in the reeds at the edge of the river Nile. Moses' basket was covered with pitch in similar fashion. Remember Noah's ark was described as covered in pitch. Both of those cabinets, Moses' basket and Noah's ark, were salvation, means to salvation. They were both cabinets of salvation to the occupants, to those who were inside. But now the cabinet has become a container for the salvation. That is the law, the tablets, and the manna, and then later the budded staff. It says in the text, verse 10 again of chapter 25, they are to make an ark of acacia wood, 3 3/4 feet long, 2 1/4 feet wide, 2 1/4 feet high. So this is a long, kind of squarish, rectangular box. You are to overlay it with pure gold, overlay it both inside and outside. So this is what we have, this once again, covering it. And we have this imagery of something being covered, which leads us into verse 18. You are to make 2 Keruvim of gold. Make them of hammered work for the 2 ends of the ark cover. Make 1 Keruv for one end and 1 Keruv for the other end. Make the Keruvim of one piece with the ark cover at its 2 ends. The Keruvim will have their wings spread out above, so that their wings cover the ark, and their faces are toward each other and toward the ark cover. You are to put the ark cover on top of the ark. So this is the description of the cover of the ark, and the question is, what's happening with these Keruvim? If this is to be the seat where Adonai dwells, this is where he sits down, what's happening with these Keruvim? And there's a lot of stylized art that you can find, drawings and imaginations of what this might have looked like. And remember, this is all according to the pattern, according to the description of what Adonai showed Moses in the heavens. So the implication being that what they made was according to Moses' memory of what he saw when he was in the presence of Adonai, his memory of what was there in the temple court in the heavenlies. So this presumably and reasonably has been lost to history, but presumably and reasonably, if we could find this ark, we would have an exact representation of what was in the heavens. This Keruvim facing each other, their wings covering the ark and covering and spreading out above and then covering the cover of the ark, and their faces are toward each other and toward the ark cover. A very interesting description there, where their faces are toward each other and toward the ark cover. So you could get the sense that they're looking at each other, but also looking down a little bit to look down upon the cover and whatever it is that would have been sitting there. So you have this shape of these wings stretched out, and then the faces of the Keruvim facing each other, facing down, standing at each end, or kneeling at each end, and facing towards the center. The center being a kind of throne. You could see the shape of almost a throne there. Where else do we see two Keruvim facing each other? Well, we see two Keruvim just a chapter later, verse 31 of chapter 26. It says, "You are to make a curtain of blue, purple, scarlet yarn, finely woven linen. Make it with Keruvim worked in, that have been crafted by a skilled artisan. Hang it with gold hooks, etc. Bring the ark for the testimony inside the curtain, and the curtain will be the divider between you and the holy place, between the holy place and the most holy place." So this is one place where we have and talk about the two Keruvim, or with Keruvim of some description, some number, worked in. And then the artistic representations of this, where you see people who've tried to imagine what this would have looked like, is that once again the perchet, the curtain, would have perhaps been divided in the middle where a person could walk through, and the Keruvim would have been woven on this curtain. Once again, the implication being they were facing each other. Where else do we see Keruvim, two Keruvim specifically, facing each other? And that is in Bereshit, in Genesis chapter 3, when Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden. It says this, chapter 3, verse 24, "And he expelled the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden he had Keruvim dwell along with the whirling sword of flame to guard the way to the tree of life." Once again, we've got two Keruvim with the whirling sword of flame, and it's both those elements. It's the sword of flame, but it's also the Keruvim who are guarding the way to the tree of life. And depending on how we go here in the next 15 minutes or so, I may decide to take a little detour, and we'll talk about the marriage model that is expressed there in the two Keruvim guarding the way to the tree of life, which is just a beautiful metaphor. But we'll see. Many of you have heard me teach on that. It's part of my regular teaching and so forth. So could be all of you have heard this teaching before, and I'm sure other people teach on it as well. In the Hebrew, et ha-keruvim ve'et lahat ha-kerev hamitha pachet lishmor et derech et hachaim. Notice the play on words. We've got the ha-keruvim, that's the Keruvim, the angelic beings, and then we've got ve'et lahat ha-kerev, that's the sword. So we've got the play on words here, almost a linguistic play on words. We've got cherev, which is for sword, and then we've got Keruvim, which is the angelic beings. And in the language, phonetically, those two words are somewhat similar. There's a linguistic similarity, and so this is one of the things that we see is the Keruvim acting as guards, acting as a force to protect, what goes on here behind. In a number of places in the Tanakh, going back to the description of the Mishkan, where we have the Ark in the most holy place. Again, we're talking about the furnishing, primary furnishing of the most holy place. We haven't even started talking about the structure of the Ark of the temple, or I'm sorry, of the tabernacle, the structure of the Mishkan yet. We're still talking about the Ark, which is inside the most holy place. In a number of places in the Tanakh, Samuel, Kings, etc., we find that Adonai is referred to as the one who sits upon a cheres. We see this, let me see if I have it here in my thoughts. 1 Samuel chapter 4. So the people sent to Shiloh, and from there they carried the Ark of the Covenant of Adonai Tzvaot, who sits above the Keruvim. So this again, the Keruvim creating a kind of throne here. 2 Samuel chapter 6. And David and all the people who were with him arose and set out from Baale Judah to bring up from there the Ark of God, which is called by the very name of Adonai Tzvaot, who is enthroned above between the Keruvim. Once again, 2 Kings chapter 9, we see this. Hezekiah prayed before Adonai, saying, Adonai, God of Israel, who is enthroned upon the Keruvim, you alone are God of all the kingdoms of the earth. You made heaven and earth. Isaiah 37, also quoting the story of Hezekiah going up to pray at the temple at the time when he was judged by Adonai. So Isaiah chapter 37, Adonai Tzvaot, the God of Israel, who is enthroned upon the Keruvim. You alone are God of all kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Incidentally, look down a little further in Isaiah and you see this, Isaiah chapter 37. So this shall be the sign to you. This year you will eat what grows by itself, in the second year what springs from that, but in the third year you will sow, reap, plant vineyards, and eat their fruit. And then skipping down to verse 31, the surviving remnant of the house of Judah will take root downward and bear fruit upward. For from Jerusalem a remnant will go out, and survivors from Mount Zion. The zeal of Adonai Tzvaot shall perform this. I believe that this passage is kind of a prophetic declaration about the state of things on the earth during these days. I may be speaking on this in the coming weeks because it just seems very, very poignant right now. And but just in brief, to introduce the topic, perhaps. This year shall be assigned to you. This year you will eat what grows by itself. In the second year you will eat from what springs from that. But in the third year you will sow, reap, plant vineyards, and eat their fruit. What is the activity of the kingdom? It should be harvest. What did we find last year? Last year we had a harvest in COVID times, even though we were prohibited from meeting and from functioning the way congregations would normally function. But we still had a harvest in the kingdom. We still had growth in the kingdom, which was just a phenomenon to many of us. And then it says, this year you will eat what grows by itself. Last year, 2020, with COVID, it seemed like the kingdom was growing on its own. In the second year, you will grow from what springs from that. You will eat from what springs from that. In other words, the harvest will come from what's left over from what we didn't eat the first year. So in the kingdom sense, the second year will be the year of additional harvest from the first year. But in the third year, you will sow, reap, plant vineyards, and eat their fruit. And that, in my mind, is indicative of perhaps a revival, or at least a significant uptick in spiritual activity in the kingdom of God. So this is how I see it. And then it talks about the surviving remnant of the house of Judah will take root downward and bear fruit upward. So from Jerusalem a remnant goes out, and survivors from Mount Zion, the zeal of the Lord Adonai Tzvaot shall perform this. And again, what we saw last year, the kingdom harvest last year was Adonai's own. And so those are some of my thoughts. You may not agree with those. Many people may not agree with those, but I'll probably be looking at that in the coming weeks, and maybe we'll teach on that on Shabbat. Kingdom life as we know it was altered, and is continuing to be altered this year. We did not sow and harvest in the way which we had become accustomed. The second year it says the harvest will come up from what sprang up by itself in the first year, but in the third year you will sow, reap, plant vineyards, and eat their fruit. And so this is what I'm praying. I'm praying that this is a paradigm. I'm praying that this is the model. It's not a prophetic statement as such. It's rather gives me something to pray about. Returning to the Keruvim. On the atonement cover, it is described as a seat. Verse 17, then you are to make an atonement cover of pure gold, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide. Translated as a seat of atonement, or translated as a seat of mercy. This seems to be borrowed significantly from the references in Samuel and Kings that we just talked about. So this seat of mercy, this primary first reference in the description of the Mishkan, in the layout of the Mishkan in the most holy place, is where we see the throne of the presence of Adonai. And this throne of the presence of Adonai, this throne is constructed with the unity of the two Keruvim, looking at each other and looking down at the seat, at the atonement, at the seat of atonement. What do we see from that? Just that in all cases wherein two or more are gathered, it says two or more are gathered and agree that there I am among them. And once again we have the example of the two Keruvim in agreement with each other, looking to each other face to face. And it is in the midst of that we see the appearance of the Shekhinah, the glory, the presence of Adonai. All right, I want to back up and talk about the layout of the tabernacle of the Mishkan. I want to talk about the actual floor plan, if you will. And to do that, I'm borrowing a slide from HebrewForChristians.com. If you're familiar with HebrewForChristians.com, they do a very good job of providing a great deal of material on the Torah and on the traditions of Judaism and so forth. It's a highly recommended site, and if you aren't familiar with it, I would encourage you to go there to do some of your study. What you should see on your screen is a drawing of what at least John Parsons believes is the layout of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the tent. What we see around the outside here is this, let me see if I can do this a little differently. I'm going to try to actually pull this up in a different way, and stand by for just a moment while I master the technology and see if I'm very successful here. Yeah, I probably shouldn't whistle, right? That's probably a bad idea. Okay. And let's go there and go there. And then we're going to go here and we're going to go there. Now on your screen, you might find nope, that is not going to work any better, is it? It's actually going to make it worse. Alrighty. So much for technology, right? We'll go back to this. Okay. So what you see on your screen now is hopefully a legible version of the Mishkan. This is the exterior around the outside. These tiny rectangles are the columns or posts, and then the exterior curtain that makes up the courtyard. And then we see the altar, which is here, and there's a ramp leading up to the altar. And then to the left of the altar, we see the copper basin for cleansing. And then you go into the actual Mishkan, the tent. And inside the tent, you see an altar of incense. You see a table, which is for the showbread. And you see the menorah, which is the lighted candle. And then you would go through a tent, or I'm sorry, you'd go through a curtain. This is the parachet that would have been figured with the Keruvim. And you go into the most holy place, and you see that there is the Ark of the Covenant there in the most holy place. All right, what I want you to see here in this, we've got the altar which is where the sacrifices would have been consumed, and especially in the Olah offering, where everything is entirely consumed. But this is where the sacrifice is made, and this is where the sacrifice is burned. Consider the altar like similar to a mouth, where the meat is consumed, where the sacrifice is truly consumed. And if that's a mouth, then what would we expect to see as we go from right to left? We would expect to see, if we've seen a mouth, what's the next thing we expect to see? And that would be a nose. Where is the nose represented here? On this sort of layout, on this sort of diagram, where would the nose be represented? The nose is represented in the altar of incense, because truly the incense is what you smell. You smell the incense, and that's what that is. So the incense is what's next. And if we're working our way, we've got a mouth, and then we went to a nose. What would we expect to see next? But eyes. What do we have on this drawing, on this layout, that is some sort of representation of eyes? Well, we have two here. We have the menorah. The menorah, of course, is for providing light to see by, so that would indicate eyes. Well, what do we do with the table of showbread? Well, the table of showbread is it's a huge stack of bread that is on display, and it is just there to be seen, and it's called the showbread. It's there to be seen, and so again, we've got the light from the menorah, and we've got the bread that is shown. And here we see, this is where Adonai who sees would see with eyes. Well, okay, so if we started with the altar, we've got a mouth, and then we went to the incense for a nose, and then we went to the menorah and the table for a representation of the eyes. Well, where do we go from there? Next, we've got this ark in the most holy place. We've got the curtain, and behind the light, behind the eyes, we have a curtain that divides, and then we have a secret place, a most holy place, a most private place. In my humanity, if you were to describe my humanity, in my humanity, I have a mouth, I have a nose, I have eyes, but what do I have behind my eyes? Well, what is the secret place behind my eyes? What is the place of intimacy behind my eyes? It is the mind. It is the identity. It is who I am. It is my personhood, my existentiality, if you will. And what do we see here on your screen? But we see, again, the nose going to the eyes, and then there's a curtain, which denotes the privacy behind the eyes, and then we have the ark. What does the ark look like in this sort of diagram, in this sort of layout? The ark looks like the mind, which is where we have the private conversation that we have with Adonai. Every single one of us has had a private conversation with Adonai in our mind. Even if you're not a believer, you've had a private conversation with Adonai in your mind, because he has presented himself to you and you have rejected him, or at least you have so far. You should probably do something about that. You should probably address that, and now is really the time to do that. But we have that's where we have the private conversation. That's where we have the most holy place. That's where we have the most private and most intimate place. And Adonai is showing us that that's where he meets with us, is in that place where our identity dwells. Our identity dwells, primarily we invest our identity in our mind, not so much in our heart or in our loins. The loins being the place of animalistic sort of desire and need, the heart being romantic and passionate desire and need, and the mind being both the reason but also the melding of everything, the combining of everything, of the animal and the emotional, spiritual, heart level, and then of course the rational, reasonable. And all those things are balanced together. That's why you can have hard-working family men who work very hard, very analytical lives, but they can write beautiful poetry to their spouses, because they are men both of reason and rationale, and of romance and of passion. That's what Adonai wants us to be. He wants us to be balanced. He wants us to be wholehearted in our relationship with Him. In the same way, we need to be whole in our relationship with our spouses. But in any case, so this is what we see. We see the private separation, if you will, of the curtain that separates the table, the showbread, and the menorah, the lighting of the menorah. And within this we have the ark. And inside the ark we have the tablets, which represent the covenant. And we also have a jar of the manna, and we have Aaron's budded star, the star that, or staff, sorry, and the staff that that budded and produced flowers and produced nuts or almonds or fruit or whatever it might have been. So this is what it says here. This is the layout of the Mishkan, and what do we see? You can find that more on that on HebrewForChristians.com, which is where we borrowed that graphic, and you can find other teachers on this same topic throughout the internet world. So this is what we have. Behind the eyes, the mind, the center of being, is the center of our locus, if you will, of where we sort of assemble, collate, and put together our heart, our loins, our passion, our reason, and we put it all together, and we create the person that you see when you look in the mirror, that you walk around the earth. Adonai said something very simple. He said, "Seek my face." And so you look at the floor plan, you look at the layout of the Mishkan, and you see the face of God. And that truly is what it's all about at the end of the day, is the salvation that is attendant in Yeshua, first of all, in the Torah, and in His gospel, and in His sacrifice that is communicated through all these things. This is the fundamental conclusion of the Torah, of the Mishkan, and of the temple, the sacrifices, and the days when the priest would come to the temple, and of course the day of Yom Kippur when the high priest would come into the temple and perform the avodah, the temple service, on the Yom Kippur sacrifice. This is all pointing to Yeshua, and all driving towards Yeshua. And I would encourage you to consider Yeshua as the Jewish Messiah, the Mashiach. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. We're going to go ahead and conclude there today. Just a note again, look to the description below for my email address, and you can reach out to me there. Again, thank you all for joining us, and if you have any questions, please let us know. Shalom, shalom.